Conrad Knoll flew his political colours openly inside the church.
This is where he flew the flags that we're always hearing about, in this part of the crossing. The red flag and the flag of Free Ireland, the Sinn Féin flag.
Right.
So
they're done well now if you put them up.
Well, I thought if I had them, I would.
Yeah.
It was that red flag. That was the focal point. Not the Russian red flag, but it had a motto on the bottom, "He hath made of one blood all nations."
So it may have been the red flag of martyrdom, but it was still a red flag, and people thought, here's a Bolshevik priest.
They did, and they were right to think that, because he was a Bolshevik priest.
When news that Knoll was flying the red flag inside his church hit the front pages, a group of right-wing undergraduates took exception and turned up in Thaxted, determined to tear it down.
Students from Cambridge used to roar down here on a motorbike in the door.
Yeah.
We're trying to get the flag, the red flag, down.
And did they succeed?
Yes, they did once, didn't they?
I think once only.
They burnt it in the
Within
boring.
24 hours, it was another one put back.
Did they come back and try and...
Oh, come back ever so many times.
Yeah.
Oh, ever so many. We used to look forward to them coming.
Well, it was a bit of action, was it?
It was the only bit of fun we used to have.
Watching the Cambridge students burn the
There
flags.
wasn't a lot of else going on, was there?
No.
Knoll further incensed his enemies by refusing to fly what he saw as the ultimate flag of imperialism, the Union Jack. Tension mounted, and things eventually came to a head on Empire Day, 1921.
Everybody was asked to put the Union Jacks out. Of course, they didn't. Conrad didn't believe in that. And his sister used to hang all her rugs out the window down the road.
They were lovely Persian rugs too.
They used to all... And the opposite, they used to have Union Jacks. The man at the cock, he was a dreadful man.
The pub,
The pub owner, yes. And they used to have ever so many Union Jacks out. The bigger the better.
Crowds of protesters against Knoll began to arrive, and by evening there were 1,000 people roaming the streets of Thaxted. Union Jacks were attached to the Guildhall, and as running battles began to break out, the angry mob marched on the church. Then an offer of help arrived from a sympathiser of Knoll's, the novelist H.G. Wells.
And Wells came down in his Rolls Royce to pick up Conrad and take him back, because there was certainly a threat on Conrad's life, they thought. And so they wanted as far as possible to save Conrad from any kind of attack like that. I don't think Conrad went, but I do think he actually took shelter in his own vicarage.
Conrad Knoll was eventually forced to remove his beloved flags from the church, but his socialist experiment continued in Thaxted until the Second World War, and his revolutionary version of Anglicanism has left a legacy of more than just Morris dancing. Conrad Knoll's pulpit politics have inspired generations of radical clergy, as well as left-wing politicians, and it would have delighted Knoll to learn that years after his death, he inspired a young priest who went on to become a thorn in the side of Mrs. Thatcher, the very turbulent Archbishop of Canterbury, Robert Runcie. Yet despite the activities of men like Conrad Knoll, the forces of reaction in the church in the 20s were still strong.
This is London calling the British Isles.
The founding of the BBC in 1923 offered the church a new instrument for reaching ordinary people in their own homes. But, like most things new, radio was greeted with deep suspicion by the clergy.
When the BBC wanted to broadcast a service from Westminster Abbey, the Abbey replied, "I'm sorry, you can't broadcast one of our sacred services because it might be heard by men in pubs with their caps on." And there was a great deal of opposition among cathedral chapters and collegial clergy, because they thought it was going to be a rival to the services of the churches.
The BBC's founder, John Reith, decided to approach the Archbishop of Canterbury.
He invited Randall Davidson, the Archbishop, and his wife to dinner, and after dinner he turned on the wireless. He had something very suitable on at that moment, you see, and the Archbishop was quite astonished by this, and he said, "But the window's shut." So ignorant were we all at that time.
But this demonstration was enough to convince him that this could be powerful.
Yes, yes, and that was really characteristic.
To mollify the clergy, it was agreed that the BBC would remain silent during Sunday's church services, and the Archbishop